Greetings F1 fans, Ian Higton from Eurogamer here with an exclusive interview about F1 2013 to get your engines revving in anticipation for its release. Or something like that. We popped along to the recent F1 2013 preview event and had a chat with Steve Hood, the game's creative director, about the newly announced addition of classic cars, drivers and tracks to the franchise. So Steve, you've finally got classic cars in. How long have you been wanting to do this and why has it taken so long to get them included?
We've been trying to do it since we first got the Formula One licence because rather annoyingly now, every year that we look back, everybody's saying, have you got historic cars or classic track, classic drivers? And every year we're saying no, every single year. And it's quite disappointing to say that, but we have been working on it in the background. So we've been pushing to try and sign these license deals, explore the possibility of creating an event around classic cars. So it's been a long time in the coming. So finally, for 2013, we're including it.
And how exactly are the classic cars going to work in F1 2013?
So there's a specific mode called F1 Classics, and within that you've got access to the normal stuff like time trial, a Grand Prix mode, time attack, and a few other goodies in there as well, which we'll talk about at a later date. But that's kind of themed with its own front end, looking around a classic car in a classic garage. But you can also, outside of that, take your classic vehicle and put it on a modern circuit if you want, and mix and match classic cars with modern day circuits to kind of compare the performance. So it isn't kind of just shoehorned off into its own kind of small element. It is a substantial component of the 2013 game.
You've announced some of the classic drivers in there as well, like Nigel Mansell. Can we expect to see people like Senna and maybe some other champions in there as well?
What we've tried to do is incorporate everybody that is still around in the world today, still alive. So it's almost a recreation event, much like people talk about. One of the guys mentioned earlier, Goodwood Festival of Speed. That is a great example of the kind of thing that we're basing this around when we originally thought of trying to include classic content. So it's some of the old manufacturers coming back with great names in Formula One, getting some of the old cars out of the storage, if you like, and some of the existing drivers coming back to the team. So all the cars have two drivers. There's normally an original driver that drove for them in the day. You mentioned Nigel Mansell. He drives the 92 Williams. One of my kind of fan favourites is back in there. But then we try to pair them with drivers that are legends for that particular mark or are famous for driving that particular brand. So it enables us to incorporate drivers that perhaps a little more well known than some of the second drivers that have raced for the teams throughout the years, and really kind of creates a more interesting gamey environment to incorporate all this classic content.
You've included a few classic tracks also, but there are some existing tracks like Silverstone that used to be a lot more classic. Will you be featuring some early formations of these tracks in the game?
No, we're not bringing more and more circuits back. I mean, the problem for us, I think, because we're a licensed Formula One game, is there are a lot of hoops to jump through. And we've been saying this every year since we've been doing Formula One, and that was the problem in trying to include classics in classic content in the first place. But we've been pushing that and speaking to a lot of people and opening doors over time. So what we've got this year, and having Jerez and Brands Hatch and Imola and a few other bits and pieces in the game that you can unlock over time, the important thing for us is to make that first step in classic content. But understandably, as soon as you open that door, there's more questions about what else you could include. And everybody's got a favourite circuit. Everybody's got a favourite driver and a favourite team that they would like to see come back. And what we're not intending to do is drip feed content, little content packs over time. We are literally kind of making it easy and picking the interesting things from the 80s and the 90s and putting 4 cool tracks in that people will recognise from historic era of Formula One as our first foray into classic content for Formula One.
I think it's fair to say that it hasn't really been a classic year for F1 so far, and there's been some elements on track which have been responsible for that. Are you looking to replicate those elements, like the tyres blowing out and the large amount of pit stops?
Certainly the pit stops is quite interesting, but what we do, considering we come out later on in the season, is take a view of that season. So, as soon as people are watching a Grand Prix, and if there's a tyre blowout, I obviously get those messages on Twitter and people say, hope you got the tyre blowout, so otherwise I'm not buying it. Well, that's not the flavour of the entire season. And if somebody has a terrible race, it doesn't mean we're trying to replicate their performance for that particular track and at that moment in time. But if McLaren start to ascend now and come back, become a stronger force, then maybe we try to incorporate elements of that into the game so that maybe at the beginning of the season they're struggling, but their upgrades come into effect to make them more, competitive later on in the season. So we try to match the overall flavour of the season rather than specific instances. And I think the tyre blowouts, hopefully, Pirelli seems to think so, that we'll have seen the last of those. So is it worth us investing in tyre explosion tech for a particular couple of races? Probably not.
And what platforms is it coming out on? Just current gen for F1 2013?
It's current gen, so again it's 360 PS3 and we're doing PC. Obviously in the future people will be talking to us about whether or not we're coming out on next gen, and a company of Codemasters size are always looking to tomorrow. But we thought it was time for us now to do kind of one final iteration on the current gen really for a big game changer, and that's 2013 with classic content. Tomorrow we'll see what that brings.
Thanks, Steve. Martin Robinson has done a big old write-up on F1 2013 over on Eurogamer.net, where you can get even more newly announced info on the game. Just click on that top annotation to jump straight there. But before you go, why not give us a sub by clicking on the bottom one? We've got plenty more exclusive interviews coming up, along with early gameplay demos, interactive live streams, and loads more. It's a Grand Prix of content. Bye.